Shalom everybody from the great nation of Israel. My name is Barry Siegel and this is VFI News This Week. Greetings, and anyone else watching this video. IDF soldiers in the Gaza Strip have found the remains of Yusuf al-Ziyadne, 53 years old, who was kidnapped into Gaza from Kibbutz Cholit on October 7, 2023. The soldiers also reportedly found evidence that his son Yusuf had been murdered nearby where his remains were found. This will likely bring added pressure on the Israeli government to agree to a deal with Hamas to release the remaining hostages. But Hamas keeps lying and playing games like they've been doing all along. Well, we'll also have an update on the health status of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the preparations the IDF is making for a possible strike on Iran, potential war with Turkey, and the list just goes on and on and on. All that and more is just ahead on this week's edition of VFI News from Israel. Now, I'm not becoming old, I'm just becoming vintage, my friends. That's right, as the sign says, with now over 433 videos posted at Vision for Israel, I'm bringing you more, and I keep going. We'll start with some more details about the hostages situation and the status of Yusuf al-Ziyadne, who, as I said in the introduction, was kidnapped on October 7th along with 3 of his children. They are members of Israel's Bedouin community, and Yusuf had worked on the Kibbutz Cholit for 19 years. His daughter Aisha and her brother Bilal were subsequently released, and the family had hoped that Yusuf and Hamza would be part of the next round of released hostages, but now they know their loved ones are gone. It's a very difficult ending to a family's tragic story, and once again, this is a reminder that there are hundreds of mothers and fathers, children, brothers, sisters, and other family members and friends of people still being held in the Gaza Strip. Now, these family members have been lobbying the government to accept any deal, almost any deal, at any price, which will lead to the release of the hostages. But as I said before, Hamas keeps changing their minds and their narrative. They'll say they are ready to release X number of hostages, but then an announcement will come that many of them will actually be the remains of hostages who were murdered in captivity. Then they'll say they need a week's pause in the fighting to check on all the hostages. This is sometimes accompanied by an admission that they do not have custody of many of the hostages, and this fuels speculation about how many hostages might still be alive. It's sick, it's evil, and it's cruel what they're doing. But what does anyone else expect out there? Meanwhile, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has repeated his warnings that the hostages better be released by his inauguration day, which is on the 20th of January, less than 2 weeks away. He has also dispatched his designated Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff to Doha for talks aimed at finalizing the hostage release. Now, there are reports that a final deal is nearing completion, but frankly, we've heard that before. I am advising everyone to pray, even fast, earnestly, for a good outcome and not put too much hope or trust in earthly powers, however well-intentioned they might be. There are simply too many factors that are not under anyone's actual control, and I would say that even that includes Hamas. Moving on to another problem we're dealing with and another deadline. We're nearly 3/4 of the way through the 60-day ceasefire with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Now, to briefly review, the ceasefire was supposed to give Hezbollah time to move north of the Litani River. The Lebanese National Army was supposed to then move into the region between the Litani and the Israeli border to establish order, fill the security vacuum, and allow the IDF to withdraw to its side of the border. Israel has no desire to keep the IDF in Lebanese territory long term. We'd much prefer that the Lebanese National Army do its job and keep Hezbollah away from the border. Swat the flies, so it can't threaten our northern communities. But Hezbollah has not moved its remaining forces north of the Litani River. The Lebanese National Army is moving very slowly to take control of these areas, and the IDF keeps finding more and more Hezbollah bunkers, tunnels, weapons, and ammunition in the southern Lebanon region. All this stuff needs to be cleared out and demolished. The IDF can't simply shrug its shoulders and forget about it if it's all left in place. Hezbollah will surely try to use it against Israel in the future, and possibly not even in the very distant future. Now, beyond that, if the IDF moves out of the area, the fear is that the Lebanese National Army won't move in quickly enough, and Hezbollah will simply move back into those areas, and we'll be right back where we started. On that note, it's worth mentioning that the Biden administration has diverted around $100 million worth of military assistance that had been earmarked for Egypt and Israel and moved it to the Lebanese armed forces instead. Thanks, Biden. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but I suppose maybe it's one way of looking at it and necessary under the circumstances. That is, if you trust the oversight of the Lebanese National Army. Well, that's partly because in recent days, rhetoric from Hezbollah officials has begun to sound pretty tough. They're saying they weren't beaten at all, but that they actually did Israel a favor by agreeing to a ceasefire which would allow the IDF to take a break from the terrible beating they were giving it. Really, give me a break. They're also threatening that if the IDF doesn't stop demolishing all the Hezbollah tunnels, bunkers, and weapons storehouses Hezbollah left behind in southern Lebanon and then retreat south of the border, Hezbollah's patience might run out. Do they remember the walkie-talkies and the pagers? Well, one Hezbollah leader also said that the organization is stronger than ever and ready for another round of fighting with the IDF. Now, this kind of rhetoric might be funny if it wasn't so tragic that Hezbollah's refusal to accept that has been badly clobbered in this round of conflict and ought to take a very long break. Coffee break at that means that the long-suffering people of Lebanon are probably in for more suffering and hardship in the future. Most of them probably don't even care who wins or loses this war anymore. They just want to get back to their homes and get on with their lives. Don't forget to pray for the Christian Arab community in Lebanon, by the way. The same goes for Israelis who live in northern communities close to the border. Some have managed to return to their homes in the weeks since the ceasefire began, but many of them don't have much to go back to. That's because Hezbollah systematically fired anti-tank missiles into their communities for months, destroying one building after another. Now, why would Hezbollah do this? I think at least part of the answer is just pure spite. There certainly wasn't any strategic reason to do so, but some people just can't stand to see others enjoying something nice, like a pleasant home to live in, or an apartment, or a nice store to buy groceries in. So they fire anti-tank missiles at those buildings to blow them all up. That is Hezbollah against Israel, just because they can. If they could, they'd like to do the same thing to all the houses and buildings in Haifa, Herzliya, Tel Aviv, Ashdod, Ashkelon, and frankly, all over Israel. They had a massive arsenal of rockets, drones, and missiles they wanted to fire at us to do this, and much of it has been lost in the fighting. But Hezbollah still has a large arsenal, and the only reason they're not using it right now is because they're at a relative strategic disadvantage. But there's no doubt that if that ever changes, Israel will once again be in existential danger. This is what we're dealing with in Israel, friends, and this is a good place to mention that here at Vision for Israel, we're continuing to support communities in the north, the south, all over Israel, under fire with whatever they need. This includes bomb safety shelters. We're now over 400 that have been installed by the work of Vision for Israel and our partners out there, which are still very relevant to be placed and might be more so if this ceasefire with Hezbollah ends and hostilities resume. It also includes equipment and training for firefighting crews, which has been very important as thousands of acres of forest and agricultural lands have been set ablaze by rocket fire in this war. Teams of medical first responders have also received equipment and training from Vision for Israel, and we have no plans to slow down those efforts. This war isn't over yet, and it might even be getting bigger and worse, as well as we'll talk about that in just a moment. Vision for Israel is also providing ongoing welfare assistance to hundreds of families who need help with the basic necessities of life through our logistics warehouse at the Millennium Center in Modi'in. Now that's halfway between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv in the heart of Israel. And we invite you all, when you come to tour Israel, come and visit the Millennium Center. Now, every single day we purchase large volumes of various items, household goods, to be delivered to the Millennium Center, and then our Vision for Israel team of volunteers takes these supplies, divides them up into parcels, and delivers them to people all over the country. We've been doing this for many years. Now we're celebrating our 30th year anniversary. But in this current season of economic hardship, the needs have never been greater. So if you're watching this video, it's probably because you want to know the best way to pray for us. We're deeply grateful for this, and if you want to do more than just pray, you can visit our website at visionforisrael.com, click on the Projects tab, and if you feel led to support us financially, that's the best way to do it. No donation is too big or too small. Now back to the news. And we're staying on the topic of the northern border, but shifting slightly east to Syria. As we reported before on this channel, the IDF is set up on defensive positions inside Syrian territory. This is necessary because the situation in Syria is very unstable. The new regime in Damascus, while saying some very positive things, including repeated assertions about having no intentions of threatening Israel at this time, simply cannot guarantee that none of those other armed factions in the country will take the same approach. There are large swaths of Syrian territory that is completely outside the control of the new administration in Damascus, and all kinds of people are active in those ungoverned spaces. Israel cannot take a chance that someone will attempt to approach our northern border from these areas and try to attack us. Nevertheless, to also add to it that these groups are also attacking various Alawite forces or populations that were safely under the control of Assad before, and also especially the Christian Arab population in Syria. We need to pray for our brothers and sisters there. Now that is why the IDF is setting up positions in the border region, carrying out patrols and capturing or destroying weapons, ammunition, and military equipment that the Assad regime forces left lying around. Several Druze villages in this area have asked to be placed under Israeli protection, and people from all over southern Syria have been bringing crates of ammunition, grenades, and other ordnance to the IDF troops. These people are sick and tired of war. They know that if this stuff is ever picked up by someone irresponsible, it'll be grabbed by someone else, and they'll use it to keep this war going. That's why they're giving it to the IDF, because they know the IDF is responsible and can be trusted to get rid of it. It's all good news that the Iranian-backed Shiite militias in Syria have almost completely faded away, as the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps have evacuated the country. Unfortunately, just as they're leaving, another large and powerful force that is potentially hostile to Israel is moving in. I'm talking about the Turkish army, which has deployed large regular forces to the northern part of Syria and have a pretty large degree of influence, if not outright control, over the Sunni jihadist groups which make up the bulk of the armed factions controlling Damascus and the other large cities near the coast. Ostensibly, Turkey's main concern is the Kurdish factions who control the territory in northeastern Syria adjacent to the Turkish and Iraqi borders. There have already been clashes between Turkish-backed forces and the SDF, or Syrian Democratic Forces, which are the Kurdish armed forces that are supported by the United States. Israel has also a quiet alliance with the SDF, and this is a point of conflict with Turkey. But it's not the only such point. Turkey's president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, has declared his nostalgia for the Ottoman Empire. I thought that was a chair. Oh, do you remember history? Any of you study it? Well, he recently said very openly that he considers these Syrian cities to be rightfully part of Turkey's natural sphere of influence, and even said during a recent speech that Jerusalem is ours, meaning Turkey, the Ottoman Empire. Now, this might just be overheated rhetoric, which Erdogan is known for, but it might not be. It's an old trick of autocratic leaders to distract their people from economic hardships at home by talking about an external enemy. This is often accompanied by passionate speeches about past glories, which sometimes lead to attempts to recapture territory that was held in previous eras. Oftentimes, these attempts end up being disastrous for everyone involved, and that's yet another reason why Israel needs to be vigilant in guarding the northern border of our country. Israeli troops are deployed in positions on the southern outskirts of Damascus, and there are Turkish troops in the vicinity of the northern outskirts. The air forces of both countries are flying in close proximity to each other as well. An accident could happen real easily, friends, and even if it doesn't, a blue ribbon panel of experts recently published a report saying that Israel needs to take steps to prepare for the possibility of fighting Turkey in the not-so-distant future. That reminds me to advise you to read Ezekiel chapter 38. Well, once again, friends, I will ask you to go to visionforisrael.com and click on the Projects tab. Israel is nowhere close to being out of the woods yet, and we need all the help we can get from our friends. Ooh, I get by with a little help from my friends, one of my happy favorite songs. Speaking of not being out of the woods yet, Iranian officials, like their clients in Hezbollah, have been making some very fiery speeches and tough talk about Israel lately. What's left of Iran's air defense forces after the Israeli Air Force struck them back in late October of last year has also been conducting drills to prepare for a possible strike on their nuclear facilities. Wait and see after President-elect Donald Trump is inaugurated on January 20th. Now, this is partly because of a very open and public discussion in Israel about how the time might have come to hit those facilities with help from the incoming Trump administration. Iran's clerical regime is nervous, as they should be. Guilty people are always nervous when they see the consequences for their wicked, evil behavior coming over the horizon. Iran has suffered one devastating strategic setback after another over the past 16 months, and their own people are becoming more and more restive as the economy in Iran continues to sputter along. The rial, Iran's currency, is at historic lows against other world currencies, and sanctions have made Iran's oil exports toxic for almost everyone except China and India, who are both demanding large discounts in exchange for continuing to do business with Iran. They're in a tough spot, but once again, like Turkey, the tough spot they're in makes them dangerously unpredictable. Will they lash out at Israel in an attempt to distract their angry, hungry, increasingly desperate population from rebelling against them before the inauguration of Donald Trump? This is a big concern in Jerusalem, and I ask you to join me in praying into this very dangerous, volatile situation. Now we're almost out of time, so I'll just briefly mention yet another front in this existential war Israel is fighting, and that's in Judea and Samaria, sometimes called the West Bank. Call it whatever you'd like, but it's the biblical heartland of Israel called Judea and Samaria. Iran is smuggling weapons, ammunition, narcotics, and money to terrorist groups and criminal gangs in the Palestinian cities of this region, trying to destabilize Israel as well as the Palestinian Authority. The IDF and the PA police are pushing back vigorously against this Iranian effort and have had a fair amount of success. Still, there have been attacks against IDF troops and Israeli civilians. One such attack took place in the city of Kedumim on Monday, resulting in the deaths of 3 Israelis and several others being wounded. Meanwhile, the PA police are trying to take back control of the city of Jenin, north of Jerusalem, almost a year after effectively losing control of it to an assortment of criminal gangs. This is a very serious problem, friends, as the instability in the Palestinian Authority arena could easily spill over into the Israeli heartland. So that's one more thing I'll ask you to join me in praying about. Now we've come to the end of our report, and it's time to continue with the tradition of ending with some good news. This week, the good news is no news. Yes, that's right. Since Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was released from the hospital last week after undergoing prostate removal surgery, there has been an almost complete blackout of news and information about his medical condition. The last reports we got said that he was recovering at home and is expected to continue recovery at home for at least another week. I'm going to take the position that no news is good news and hope I'm not making a mistake. So until next week, friends, I'm Barry Siegel, and this has been another episode of VFI News from Israel, full of information that all of you must learn and retain and understand and be educated about. God bless you, and pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They shall prosper that love thee. Shalom, shalom.